Well, the Carney government's Bill C-3 was supposed to settle the long-running Lost Canadians problem. But months after becoming law, questions about the government's ability to administer it and verify some citizenship claims have put the issue right back under the microscope. And that is where conservative immigration critic Michelle Garner comes into this story. She recently posted a video to social media talking about Bill C-3 and what appears to be a significant flaw in the legislation.
Canada's Bill C-3, Citizenship Expansion, allows U.S. citizens with criminal records legal entry via descent rights in 2026. So this article goes through how, if you've been convicted of a crime in the United States, so, or any G7 country, and these aren't countries where people are like, there's a full democratic legal system here, that if you've been convicted of a serious crime, you might now be eligible to enter Canada through Bill C-3. I warned this was going to happen.
Now, Bill C-3 came into force in December and expanded citizenship by descent while addressing people who had been excluded under the older citizenship rules. But in June, Immigration Canada asked a limited number of people who had received citizenship certificates to surrender them while the files were reviewed. Garner has been one of the most persistent critics of the legislation, questioning verification, security screening, and the definition of a substantial connection to Canada. The bigger question appears to be not simply whether Bill C-3 is good or bad, it's whether Canada can expand citizenship without weakening confidence in who actually qualifies. So, the original problem was real. Bill C-3 was designed to correct situations where people lost or never acquired Canadian citizenship because of the outdated provisions. But implementation has created new questions. Immigration Canada's June request that some citizenship certificate holders surrender their documents raised questions about how verification and how these cases were approved in the first place. And this is where Garner's criticism becomes relevant. She has repeatedly questioned the government's ability to verify applicants, conduct appropriate screening, and establish a meaningful connection to Canada. But the whole immigration issue with her doesn't stop there. Yesterday, Garner held a news conference in Ottawa highlighting another immigration-related issue.
4,000 temporary residents were charged with nearly 18,000 criminal offenses in a recent 4-year period. A third of those crimes were considered serious or organized crime related, and almost all of those were violent crime. While at the same time, judges across Canada are still giving non-citizens convicted of these serious crimes lenient sentences in order to allow them to avoid deportation consequences that have long been set out in Canada's immigration law. That is insane, and it's disgusting, and it should be considered one of Canada's greatest political scandals and tragedies. That's because practices that let certain people commit crimes with impunity are corrosive to a high-trust society. It makes Canada unsafe, leading to a society that is less trusting to everyone, including immigrants who have come to Canada and work hard and play by the rules. And it makes our country even more fragmented. But yet, in a recent press conference, Prime Minister Mark Carney claimed that he had, quote, taken back control of immigration.
And, she says, the problem is easily resolved.
Fixing these problems is not a difficult proposition. Change the criminal code. It only takes one line to stop the practice of non-citizens convicted of serious crimes from getting lenient sentences in order to avoid deportation. Implement better screening processes for immigrants, as the Auditor General herself recommended earlier this year, and change other laws to ensure that if a non-citizen is convicted of a serious crime, they are punished and then deported.
So, why does it all matter? Well, citizenship isn't just paperwork. It determines who has the rights, privileges, and responsibilities of being Canadian. If Canadians lose confidence in the system determining who qualifies, the damage goes well beyond Bill C-3. Greg, a lot to unpack here. And as much as the Prime Minister did say that he has the immigration issue under control, I would suggest, based on what Rempel Garner has revealed and the ongoing discussions that have been going back and forth, especially on Bill C-3, even prior to it being carved out of that bigger security bill that the Liberals had tabled last year, there are weaknesses. And some of the weakness, as I stated last week, sits with the minister in charge. I think she's perhaps in over her head. And I think the Prime Minister has to move quickly to get somebody in there that has a stronger grip on as to what's happening with immigration and how we're going to fix it. It just seems to be a mess, and we are, as Canadians, losing confidence in our ability. And, we went through 10 years of Trudeau opening the doors wide open. The vetting was next to non-existent. And God knows what we've allowed into our country as far as people that should not have been here in the first place. And of course, you're seeing all kinds of issues in Britain, elsewhere in Europe, in Ireland, you name it. There seems to have been a decade or so where we just opened our arms to everyone, and that's a very dangerous proposition. What are your thoughts?
Well, Gary, you raise a very interesting point, because my immediate response is, what would you expect in a country or even a system that has certainly over the years cut back employees to the bare bone? And in fact, it's continuing with the cutbacks that they speak of. So in fact, what you've done is created a system where not only compliance is near impossible, but there's no checks and balances. So in other words, who is in fact vetting applications? How do people get in? And it's probably almost in every system. Example, you can now e-file your taxes because they've cut back with the tax people, and I don't want to get down a different rabbit hole, but you e-file and everything looks reasonably well, and you get a letter, thank you very much, and whatever. And I don't know who looks after or who polices. I hate that word, but it's the only word that comes to mind. Who polices these things when in fact there are, beyond loopholes, these are gaps in the system that will allow and facilitate those, for lack of a better phrase, undesirables to get into a foreign country like Canada. The second point, as I see it, and I've had this on my mind now for probably 8 to 10 years, I think when you speak out about anything associated with immigration and tightening the belt, you automatically are accused of some degree of hysteria that you're against immigration or you're against foreign people coming to our country. And I liken it to the fact that in 1875, when my grandparents came over, God only knows what vetting they had back then, but they settled into the community and they tried to be outstanding citizens, and they did their thing, and we towed the line, so to speak. We're now into a different generation that you can get in and you can live unlawfully here. You can cross the border almost at a whim. And it almost appears, if it wasn't for courts to note that someone is from a different country and even illegally here. The judges are put in an awkward situation where they have to give leaner sentences for certain crimes because the alternative is automatic deportation. So I look at it pragmatically. There's no one really manifesting the system or maintaining the system or providing any gatekeeping, if you know what I mean. Gatekeeping in you make the application, someone looks it over and he says yes, and it's fine. People can use ways and means around anything under the sun. That's the second point. The third point, of course, is we already have seen in university settings and other places when there was a free open door policy that we don't have enough in terms of resources to manage what we currently have. So it puts an undue strain on every system that we do have in place, such as healthcare, such as housing, such as employment. And I'm sorry, I can't accept the fact that, well, we don't want those jobs and we have to always defer to individuals who we really don't know, have no idea what their background is. And I think the minister here, or not the minister, but the member of parliament here, is just waving a red flag, if you want, of some of the gaps that could easily be fixed. How that all boils down to being against immigration is beyond me. I'm all for immigration, but what are the guardrails? And again, that language sounds overly protective. And sometimes when you appear to be overly protected, there is a very small jump from being overly protective to be racist. And I'm sorry, but I don't see the same in the same voice. I think that basically we have rules and regulations and we have a vetting process. Let's use it. Let's staff it so that people can do the job and do it properly.
Well, the thing that bothers me is the point that she brought up about the so-called candy sentences. And as you referred to the judges handing out minor sentences for various crimes because anything stronger as far as the sentence is concerned would automatically result in deportation. Well, I'm sorry, but yes, there have been challenges and there have been other court rulings dealing with issues like this. But here's the fact of the matter. It's laid out that you're expected to be a law-abiding citizen. It's as simple as that. And if you break the law and whatever it is, whatever the crime is that you've been charged with, then we should apply the sentence that goes with the crime. You do the crime, you do the time. And if that means the minute that the judge hands down the sentence, you make a short stop at the jail till they arrange for your deportation, and then the next day, you're out. If we don't take a strong stand, we're going to look so easy and just like a bunch of pushovers. And that's what's happened in the last 10 years with the wide open doors and welcoming arms and all of the fantasy and fairy tales that came out of Ottawa at the time. So I have a problem with that. I think that, again, the government has to clamp down and tighten up these loopholes. And if somebody does the crime and it's serious enough to get a level of a sentence that results in automatic deportation, then so be it. I'll stand at the fence out at the airport and wave goodbye, gladly.
That may be, Gary, but the thing is, there's a couple of things at play here. One, the general population has no interest in this file whatsoever. So it's so low down on people's priority lists that are trying to get by, make ends meet, and things like that. So I think, number one, no one knows it was a part of a bill packed together with something else, and unless someone dug it up and made it a public issue, it's a non-issue. Number two, I think there was a comment that you did post there moments ago, and that is what's wrong with deportation of criminals. I can't answer that. I'm not a legal expert, but there's obviously something that infers that judges, and I have the utmost respect for all judges, and I've worked my entire 51 years in forensics, in mental health, and the law. And I have the utmost respect for judges, but I can't comment on are they candy sentences. I'm taking your word for it that they're a less sentence because the alternative would be deportation. And I don't know what that means in terms of, is that more rigorous? And if so, why? Too bad. If it's rigorous, it's rigorous. We have to, if, as you say, if there's a crime committed, you have a sentencing guideline in which you use. And if deportation happens to be on that list as one option, then it needs to be fully effective. So I'd like to hear from the justice or even the civil rights movement, why are these crimes, as you call them, given candy sentences? That just blows my mind to think that they would have a less disposition to a crime because the alternative would be deportation, and that might be appealed. It doesn't make sense.
Well, let me read a couple of things here. Rempel Garner yesterday told the news conference, these types of rulings now happen so frequently that a judge here in Montreal accused Montreal prosecutors of proposing candy sentences for criminals at risk of deportation, affirming that this is a common practice across the country, she said. Practices that let certain people commit crimes with impunity are corrosive to a high-trust society. It makes Canada unsafe, leading to a society that is less trusting to everyone, including immigrants who have come to Canada and work hard and play by the rules. Now, the National Post has recently detailed many cases where a judge cited an accused's immigration status as a mitigating factor when issuing a criminal sentence. In one case cited by Rempel Garner, a judge granted a Ghanaian man and loan shark who violently stole a woman's phone a conditional discharge, citing his immigration status. That's just unbelievable. And according to her, the judge in Montreal here accused Montreal prosecutors of playing it easy. And okay, what does she say here? The Conservative MP once again called on the Liberals to amend the criminal code to prevent immigration status from being a consideration. That's it. She wants to amend the criminal code to prevent immigration status from being a consideration during sentencing for a crime, which makes a lot of sense. She also reiterated her long-standing call for the Immigration Minister, Lena Diab, and Justice Minister Sean Fraser to resign. Now, the Liberals tabled 3 bills last fall and winter that proposed a slew of criminal code changes to clamp down on bail releases and allow judges to issue harsher sentences for violent and sexual crimes, but did not explicitly target immigration cases.
So it's clear from that reading that the current government doesn't want to mix immigration with justice and make immigration, the standalone issue, when in fact it's someone who's as you pointed out at the beginning of the program, they're illegally here, they haven't been vetted, they now break the law, and really to keep them from being deported, they're given a conditional sentence or a lesser sentence, because God forbid do we ever want to say we're sending people back to where they came, because it's automatically assumed that if they're living here, they have escaped war-torn countries, and everyone fits that bill. In other words, immigration equals they're escaping the rigors of back home.
Yeah.
That's how I would interpret it. And I don't think that's the case. I don't think everyone who immigrates to Canada is coming as, for lack of a better phrase, an asylum seeker. In other words, leaving a war-torn country. That's a totally different ballpark. It would be no different than when I was working as the director of forensic care, making a case before a judge and saying, look, Your Honor, this was a very serious crime, a sexual assault, but, if you give him time in jail, he's going to lose his job. So the judge says, okay, Mr. Zed, when I consider everything, let's give him a conditional discharge on a horrendous crime, a serious crime because of loss of employment. And in that case there, everyone can make a case as not a bleeding heart, but everyone has a social conscience and thinks, you got to be fair, you got to be transparent, you have to have a balanced approach. But at the same time, if you have rules and regulations that can't hold water, then the accountability picture is what you're seeing now on social media and across North America, almost lawlessness. People will gas up and they gash and dash, and you can't do anything about it. And the attenders at the gas bar will say, well, you can't phone the police, they won't do anything. Or you can't do this or you can't do that. And there's almost helplessness permeating every community across North America. And sooner or later, I think people are going to start taking the law into their own hands. And I think that's a sorry day. That's not that far away.
No, you're absolutely right, Craig. There is definitely a breakdown that's currently underway in our society, and it's not good. And I'm not sure if we're that far advanced in this breakdown that it's going to be a real struggle to reverse it, or are we on the cusp and we have an opportunity now, but if we wait another 6 months, we've lost that opportunity completely, or to a point where it'll take more than a year or two to right it and turn the whole situation around. I cannot believe that this country has gotten to a point where, we've been taken for granted and pushed over big time. And we had a government for a decade that did nothing about it. And these people came in and they got their foot in the door. And of course, one criminal knows another, and they find ways to bring, more in. And you have the loosely structured gangs starting to form, and then they become more tightly structured. And so you have a gang problem as well. There's absolutely, to me, the law is cut and dry once you have been convicted And if the conviction carries a sentence of whatever, and that sentence happens to be enough to tip you into automatic deportation, then out you go. It's as simple as that. Why are we as taxpayers, even if they spend like a month in jail or 2 months in jail, why are we as taxpayers providing for them while in jail, only to have them come back out? And because we haven't sent them back from where they came, they're out doing the same thing again. And probably they've made enough connections in jail that they're taking the next step up on the criminal ladder. It makes no sense. Like, no wonder people have lost trust and faith in our justice system. It really, it really boggles the mind. And of course, yes, our police departments are overwhelmed with a number of different things. And a lot of these cases now are just filed. That's it. And you get a file number for the insurance company, which at this point keeps the insurance company happy. But how much longer will that be? You get a file number down the road, and first thing, you either get a huge increase in your insurance premium, or you won't be able to get insurance at all. As a lot of people are finding out now because of wildfires and flooding. So we have to turn this around. And the Prime Minister has had a lot on his plate. And he hasn't really had a tough opposition. But there are some things that, now that the initial thrust of going out and knocking on doors to make new deals is over, it's time to start paying a little more attention to issues like this at home. Because you can work on fixing all of the other problems in this country at the moment, but if you don't deal with the immigration problem, and when I say problem, that is people who have not been vetted, criminals that have been allowed in, extremists, and to a degree, even some terrorists. If we don't deal with that now, we're lost. We're lost as a country. We're lost as a society.
So maybe, Gary, what you're really getting at, even though the focus of the first section has been immigration, what you've really looked at and isolated is, in fact, a homegrown problem, but we've been so laser focused on south of the border that we haven't taken the time or effort to drill down and look at our internal problems. And that is why when you ask Canadians, what are they most concerned about? It's affordability.
Yes.
But yet, big picture, you see the housing minister announcing new bills and things of that nature. But when you look at the population, the general population, we're talking, there's a lot of housekeeping micro issues. And even that's an unfavorable word, micro, because that's inferring that the United States and our external policies is more important than internally. But if you look at even drilling down to cities, in, for instance, the province of New Brunswick, Moncton is beside itself. The growth and development and expansion in Moncton, New Brunswick, I mean, I live in St. John or the greater St. John area, and I don't want to appear to be knocking a community afar from me, but the downtown business community is just aghast at the issues that they have with the problems. The neighborhoods are you can't walk down the street. We have that almost in every major city going. It's just lawlessness. And, we're not talking just homelessness. We're talking lawlessness, where you've got shootings at these encampments. You've got bigger, deeper, rooter problems. And it's easy to say the issue is, oh, well, they closed all the mental hospitals down. And in the olden days, we wouldn't be seeing this and whatever. Well, you can't lock up someone permanently in an institution forever and a day. I mean, you could build 50,000 more central cares in the province of New Brunswick. That's not the issue. The issue is accountability, and accountability with your authoritarian system, such as policing. They have lost control. The people that they are chasing down are 2 and 3 and 4 steps ahead of them.
For sure.
And so the pendulum has swung, in my view, and I've worked in the system for 50 some odd years. I think the pendulum philosophically has swung a little too far to the left, and that now we are so preoccupied with process and rights, and I'm not inferring that you should have different laws for different people, but I'm saying I call it accountability, the measure that you can get away with almost anything nowadays with no ands, ifs, or buts.
No, and you're right. The key word is accountability.
Yeah.
And we are losing all forms of accountability at all levels. So anyway, that will be the last word on that. Our takeaway is this: fixing the lost Canadians problem shouldn't create a new confidence problem.